My name's Al Olson, and I'm with Rainbow Treecare. And I have a title of consulting arborist. I'm a ISA certified arborist. ISA stands for International Society of Arboriculture. And that symbol you can find a lot of times associated with professional tree care companies. So you'll see that symbol on the bottom right there in yellow page ads and things like that. But it's a good benchmark to always use when you're hiring a professional arborist. The name of the title of the talk today is A Checklist for Tree Maintenance. I'm going to go through these slides and just make a few comments on each slide, where we're going to cover basically the main points of the talk is, you know, planting trees, which is definitely a part of tree maintenance because everything kind of starts at that point. We're going to go through young tree maintenance, mature tree maintenance, and tree removal is obviously a part of the big scheme of things. When you're talking about maintaining other plants, you may be removing something. So we'll talk about tree removals at the very end. I like to show people what the woods looks like. You know, these trees are prospering. You know, the trees in the woods typically have everything they need. And if you think about it, you know, trees are, you know, they're forest dwellers. That's where, you know, trees naturally occur. They don't occur out in the middle of a dirt field. You know, the trees love company. They love the roots intermingling with other roots of other like trees, and they like that forest layer. And so when we talk about tree maintenance, we're talking about sometimes mimicking the forest situation. I like to put this one up here because, you know, this is the myth. You know, the myth is that there's a root system that goes down like a carrot and has like a mirror image of the above ground tree, and that's not how tree roots grow. And it's one of the reasons that trees are damaged during construction activities is because the roots of a tree in reality are very near the surface. They spread out and they go very shallow. This area right here constitutes only a couple of inches of roots if you think about it, and if you compact or damage that first few inches of soil, you can damage the tree very easily. So we talk about the root system of a tree being a very spreading, very shallow root system. We're going to go into planting because planting obviously is part of tree maintenance. If you can get the tree in the ground correctly, you can avoid problems 10 years, 5 years, 30 years down the road. And I like to show this picture because it shows a very large hole, almost 3 times bigger than the diameter or the width of the ball. And when you can disturb this soil and the roots can grow into this area, it's growing into disturbed soil. So it's not growing into compacted soil. If you were to dig a hole just big enough for the ball, those roots could become root bound, or they could start circling like they're growing in a bathtub. We also talk about planting with the collar above ground. The flaring of the tree should be exposed. Even if the ball goes up and over, that soil should be removed down until you can expose that root flare. I always remove the wire baskets and even the fabric or the burlap around a tree because I've got room. I've got a big hole that I can jump down into and I can remove all that stuff. This shows a relatively good planting size. They didn't make it necessarily as big as I would, but at least they gave the tree some room to start growing. I would make the hole a little bit bigger and actually taper the sides like my first photo showed. Digging a big hole takes a little bit more time, but the time you spend doing that pays off in the long run for the trees because they have a much better start from the get-go. This is what's usually done. You know, the holes are dug just big enough to kind of screw the tree into the ground, and they plant the tree too deep, and they leave all the burlap and all the twine around the tree. And what happens is if the tree isn't girdled by the twine, the roots will start wrapping around the tree in those situations, and you can get a stem girdling root down the road that will eventually shorten its life. This shows kind of a cutaway of really good black dirt soil, and they show a very large mulch ring, almost an exaggerated mulch ring around the tree. If you can take grass away from competition around the tree, you can create a situation where it's mimicking that forest floor. You're going to have moisture retention, you're going to moderate soil temperatures with that mulch, and you're going to have microorganisms that prefer that mulch layer. And because mulching is good, it's always overdone. This is too much. We call this the volcano mulching. And a lot of times they put the right amount of mulch around the tree, but they just put it right around the tree. If you would spread this mulch out so it's only a couple inches deep and spread it out further around the tree, you would still have the same amount of mulch, but it wouldn't be piled up, holding moisture right next to the stem. What you don't want to do with this volcano mulch, or what you're doing with the volcano mulch, is you're holding moisture along that stem that's supposed to be exposed. So that's too much mulch right around the base of the tree. Benefits of mulching, the list is long. We talk about just protecting it from lawnmower activity or weed whippers. You conserve moisture, definitely. You do control weeds. It's a natural weed barrier. In fact, whenever I put mulch down, I would recommend not putting down any fabrics underneath it or plastics. You want to get that mulch in contact with the soil. It creates an earthworm, heaven. It's an area where you get microorganisms and the creepy crawlies in the soil that make your soil a rich environment to live in. Those entities are enhanced with mulch. It reduces compaction. Because you've got all that stirring and mixing, you reduce the level of compaction that can occur. And moderates temperatures. That's a big one when we have a drought condition. If you can maintain a moisture level or have a heat barrier, because if you think about wood mulch, it's a poor conductor of heat, so your soil is going to be kept cooler on those really hot, scorching days. And it promotes good fungal growth. Fungal growth in this case are considered good. There's good fungus and bad fungus. Soil funguses, as it relates to a tree, tend to be their friend. I like to show this picture because this is a real live scenario that I worked with a client. He basically had this huge row of spruce trees relatively close together, and it was just a nightmare to get in there and mow around these trees, and he was hitting the trees with his lawnmower. So we ended up suggesting a large mulch area, and these trees have gotten twice as big since this picture was taken, and so the mulch is becoming more and more just an undergrowth, and it's very easy to maintain. I'll show you that again before and after. That's what it looked like before, and he had a large enough yard where we were able to dedicate that much area to mulch. The mulch was put down very easily with a system where it's blown in through this big hose, and it can be radio controlled from a big truck, and so all this mulch was put down literally in a matter of a couple of hours. And that's a subcontractor of ours. The name of that company is called Mulching by Mark. If you have a big area that you want to mulch, it's a very quick and easy professional way to get it done. We're going to go into pruning. Again, I'm going to start with young tree pruning, but we'll go into large tree pruning. Obviously, there's some things I always like to talk about in a checklist. Hiring a professional tree company is sometimes a mystery because you don't know one company from the next. Again, look for those professional affiliations. That's one of the best ways to weed out someone that you don't want in your tree. Asking for referrals. Call the city. The city will give you, a list of what they consider to be reputable tree companies. But we're looking for, the right protocols in pruning. There's a lot of bad tree trimming out there. We're pruning for a variety of reasons, both for structure and for safety and for aesthetics. Don't rule out aesthetics. And I like to say winter's a good time to pruning, just like summer's a good time to prune. But in the winter, we can prune elms and oak trees without the fear of oak wilt or Dutch elm disease. And so we prune year round. We have a very, very busy winter pruning calendar. We're going to talk about structural pruning. Structural pruning means the elimination of very acute branches that can cause splitting over time. So when a young tree is the time to do this training cuts. We call it training the canopy so it has a much better shape. And this can avoid, tree splitting as they mature. So the more you do when the tree is young, you can avoid problems down the road. I love this picture. This is a sycamore tree, and if you notice, you can follow the leader all the way up. And it really doesn't have any Y-shaped canopies going on. It doesn't have co-dominant branching. All the other branching is coming off of that main leader. And this is the kind of training that you want to do to a tree over its lifetime, from the time it's a very small little whip up until the time it's a mature tree. If you can do pruning to promote good architecture, that's what you want to do. Here's a much smaller version of that. Again, this is an eastern pin oak with that nice single leader. This tree had just been pruned, and what was pruned off was another leader that was going parallel with that first one. So that's the kind of pruning you want to do when the trees are very, very young. Good pruning is based on biology, tree biology. Think about the foliage of your tree like solar panels that can capture energy. That's exactly what your tree is doing. Your tree is an energy system. It's making its own food energy, and foliage is not a bad thing. You want to have as much exposure to the sun as you can, and so when we're pruning, we're not necessarily pruning to remove foliage. We're pruning to promote good balance and good structure, yet still maintain a maximization of those solar panels, i.e. leaves. The level of energy changes in the seasons. Your tree can actually do photosynthesis without foliage. If you think about a very thin bark tree, that bark actually has chlorophyll in it, and a tree can actually be photosynthetic, making energy without the benefit of green leafy leaves. And we obviously kind of make our energy during the summertime, and we store it over the wintertime, and then use that stored energy to do all those spring activities like making new leaves, making flowers and fruit, putting on all that incremental growth. Again, we use the analogy, leaves on a tree are like solar panels. Trees make and store energy. High quality pruning. Arboriculture, is a knowledge-based trade, and making the right cuts, making them in the right location with the protocols in mind is what kind of separates good pruning from bad pruning. I love that picture because it's of Johnny, in a tree, and obviously the photographer was higher in the tree, was another tree climber, and he just said, "Hey, John," and he looked up and he snapped the picture, and I've got that photo blown up into a huge picture that we got on the wall at the office. So I love that picture because it really shows the life of a tree trimmer. Again, pruning in our line of work comes with saddles and ropes. So, tree trimmers are always doing it with safety in mind, and they can maneuver through the trees very easily with the rope and saddle method of pruning and using pole saws or chainsaws or hand saws. I would say about 9 out of 10 trees that we prune in this fashion. It's only that exception, maybe 10% of the trees, that we can use a bucket truck, which we do. But you can't get a bucket truck all the time into someone's backyard. Oh, he's got his safety ropes and saddle. He's got his hard hat and his safety glasses. He's not climbing with spikes. And we've got safe above and below. We got people on the ground as a safety precaution, so that if he needs anything in an emergency, they can do it. If you ever see someone working by themselves in my industry, that's one of the biggest sins you can do, because if something happens to you, there's no one there to call 911. And using the right tools. Again, this is a series of climbers in the tree, and you can see the series of ropes that they're using in the tree to maneuver through the tree and do like a removal procedure or a large limb procedure. These guys are like puppet masters when they get in the tree sometimes with all their ropes and pulleys. This is one of our bucket trucks. This is actually one of the small bucket trucks. We have one that are much bigger than this, but obviously they're good for getting to the tippy top of a tree and maneuvering around a tree when you have the road access. You don't like to drive these off of pavement. You like to keep them on solid earth. So it's not a type of tree that you're going to be pulling into someone's backyard. Again, a skilled bucket truck operator can maneuver through a tree in a third of the time it takes someone to climb that tree. You're paying the same amount to prune the tree because you're paying for a much bigger piece of equipment to be on site versus that climber maneuvering through the tree. Whenever we can use the bucket trucks, we obviously do so because it saves on that time aspect. We're going to jump into disease and insect checklist because it's a big part of what we do. Rainbow Treecare started in this industry almost 30 years ago, treating exclusively Dutch elm disease, protecting trees from Dutch elm disease. We deal a lot with oak wilt. One of the #1 diseases that we deal with on a regular basis is apple scab and anthracnose. Those are leaf funguses. Pine shoot blight has become more of a menacing with our pine trees. And obviously emerald ash borer has made the top list of insects that we're dealing with and we're going to be dealing with for a long time. Japanese beetle last year did a real number on a variety of different trees. They attack a lot of different leafy trees and shrubs, including grapevines and raspberry bushes and rose bushes. Conifer sawfly is always a springtime issue. This is obviously a small list of the diseases and insects that we deal with, but I like to point out some of the things that probably made the top list last year, and that's it. Dutch elm disease prevention. Dutch elm disease prevention comes in the form of an injection. We actually stem inject the tree. We dig around the tree and we actually hook up like an IV system. When you're protecting an elm tree from Dutch elm disease, you're doing it once every 3 years from that point on. And we've got lots and lots of trees that we treat in that fashion. The term is microinfusion. We use that system for both Dutch elm disease and oak wilt. Now it's on a self queuing, so I hope I don't have to keep pressing the button. This is us spraying crabapple trees. That's not a real deer, by the way. That's a plastic deer over there on the right. Foliar spraying is still a necessity for certain disease controls. We're doing more and more systemic applications where we don't have to put on the spray gear and the face mask, but certain trees we still have to spray in that fashion. This is what apple scab looks on a crabapple tree. It causes the leaves to turn yellow and become very scabby and almost wilty, and it causes a lot of defoliation. This is what a crabapple looks like in the throes of apple scab. It was really bad last year. You'll see all this leaf matter underneath the tree, and this is in June or July when the tree should have all of its leaves. It's literally dumping them. And there was a term that was coined last year called sheet scab. And it was like someone had thrown a sheet over the tree and literally every square inch of the tree was infected. And we saw some crabapple trees literally lose 100% of their foliage. It's not good for any tree, obviously. Anthracnose does a real number on a variety of different trees. Oak trees, maple trees, and ash trees probably make the top list. Again, it causes leaves to fall off the tree. It's sometimes very confused with oak wilt. People think their trees are dying from oak wilt, and they're just dying. They're just losing their leaves because of anthracnose, which is kind of a generic term. Again, we're going to jump into insects now, and obviously the top insect on our list is ash trees. There's a lot of ash trees in Bloomington. There's a lot of ash trees in the Twin Cities, and there's a lot of ash trees in Minnesota. We're second only, I think, to Maine as far as the ash population that we have. And ash trees can be saved. Highly valued ash trees can be treated and protected with insecticide treatments that are either done annually or every other year. And there's a lot of information to read about emerald ash borer if you really want to take on this subject. And if you have a highly valued ash tree, it's something that at least invite you to start reading about because you'll have to make a decision whether to treat the tree or not at some point. There's currently two choices. Let the ash tree die. Some trees don't rise to the level of being protected. And so they're not a high quality tree, so you may not want to treat them, or you just might want to just take the time and just remove it right away. But letting nature take its course, there's nothing wrong with that. Highly valued trees is the trees that we would treat. And that's kind of how we look at it. You're going to be protecting your tree from having to remove it. These are the two methods of treating ash trees. This is the stem injection, and that's the soil application. This is what's called the soil drench. It's very similar to this treatment, but this is actually showing a homeowner method of treating an ash tree. Certain trees, you can do the soil application or the soil drenching. That's an annual treatment. The one on the right is done every year. The stem injection method is a restrict use insecticide. This has to be done by a professional, and that will last 2 years. And this is the method that's probably going to be the more common method of treating the trees, just because of the size trees that we're encountering, that we're protecting. I'm going to jump out of insects and diseases and go into one of the largest causes of tree death. Exceeds diseases by far, and it's called stem girdling roots. This is a picture of a technician with what's called an air spade, and they're actually removing the soil right around the base of the tree, trying to expose what might be girdling roots, roots that are wrapping around the tree. I've been dealing with girdling roots my entire career, and a lot of this has its origins with planting. Again, taking the time to plant the tree correctly, getting the right tree in the right size hole, taking precautions to avoid girdling can avoid having a tree die 30 years later because of something as simple as roots wrapping around the stem. The air spade excavation, we do a lot of these. Sometimes we're unable to actually save the tree. We don't know how bad it is until we open it up. Once the soil is removed, you'll see a fibrous mass of roots around the tree, and sometimes we'll have to get in there and start cutting that mass of roots away to expose that stem. If we can cut those roots away, sometimes we're leaving a depression around the tree, and on occasion we can save the trees. It's like a 50-50 thing usually, that I usually would recommend going to the expense of this procedure. But if you can save the tree, you can save the tree. If you don't do anything, you kind of know what its fate is, which is kind of a slow, miserable death. This is what girdling roots look without the excavation. These roots literally are compressing against the tree. That's a camera lens right there. You can see how this root is growing around the tree rather than away from the tree, and it's actually pressing up against the tree. A lot of times if I saw a tree in this condition, this far compacted, I probably wouldn't do anything for it. I'd probably write this off as maybe even a lost cause. But sometimes you get the benefit of seeing them above ground. Sometimes you have to excavate to expose how bad it is. This is us actually removing some girdling roots, and we'll use anything from a hatchet to a handsaw. We have various chisels and hammers that we use, but anything we can do to kind of remove this mass of roots. But you can see how deep this tree was planted. This tree may have been planted 18 inches too deep for all we know. It's kind of hard to tell in this picture whether or not that tree could actually be saved. It's more for demonstration purposes, but tree surgery has become a topic of exposing poorly planted trees. We try to do a lot of investigations. This is one of another arborist like myself who's actually just doing a little excavation around the tree just to see if this tree might have potentially girdling roots. We'll do a lot of this type of just quick investigative activities just to see if root surgery might be a good topic to worry about. Here we go. Soil and roots checklist. You know, proper planting depth. It's how you avoid girdling roots down the road. Girdling root, you know, extractions, you know, are part of what we do, but it's a real mixed bag as far as the success that you can get doing those. Root regeneration is a procedure that incorporates a lot of organic matter after we've exposed those compacted soils around a tree. It's becoming more and more of a treatment scenario for a tree that's in an urban landscape where the soil is very compacted right around the base of the tree. And we also talk about the benefits of mulch. That kind of, if that can start from the beginning, it can carry on throughout a tree's lifetime as a benefit. Fertilization is, you know, not necessarily a magic pill. We actually refer to it as nutrient amendments, because a lot of times we're just putting the amendments in the soil to get the tree to a point where it's got optimum levels of nutrients just for survival. So many soils are so depleted of nutrients because when the house was built, all the good soil was removed. It is a slow release, but there's so many things that you want to worry about long before fertilization. But fertilization or nutrient amendments is something that we do a lot of. This is just what a big rig looks like. We use the same type of rig for spraying trees, but we kind of customize the applications for the site or the tree species that we're dealing with. I need to keep drinking water. Big mature trees on a site where there's been turf grass growing for many, many years is probably the prime candidate for the type of fertilization or nutrient amendments that we do. And you know, trees respond to nutrients. They definitely respond to nutrients. We're not trying to make the trees grow real fast. We're trying to make and maintain just healthy trees. And nutrients are just as important as water and oxygen to a tree. I'm a consultant, and so a lot of what we do is go around and map out all the trees on the property and come up with these checklists daily. That's what we're doing. We create a checklist for our clients for things that they want to be keeping track of or watching out for. We take everything into account. We take into account the species and the insects or the diseases that could be attacking them, all the way down to, you know, the way they're maintaining their lawn. This is what a growth regulator looks like being applied. Now, a growth regulator is a subject that isn't really talked about a lot in our industry, but we use growth regulators a lot of times to help really stressed trees. One of the byproducts of using a growth regulator is you get a stimulation of actual fibrous roots in a tree. So it's kind of a robbing Peter to pay Paul type of a thing. You rob the tree from its ability to make longer twigs, and the beneficiary is a much better root system. So we use growth regulators a lot of times to help a tree that's very stressed, not necessarily worrying about how big the tree is getting, which is obviously part of a growth regulator's act on a tree. And this is the way we apply it around the tree professionally. We're using a backpack injector, and we're just going right around the base of the tree. That's where the product is applied. A growth regulator will work on a tree for about a 3-year time span before it wears off. And again, we're using this to help a tree get better established on maybe a stressed site. Slow release fertilizers that contain mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae is kind of like a fungal material that helps, it's beneficial to the tree. Mycorrhizae growing on the root system of a tree increases its surface area for absorption. Growth regulators are a big consideration sometimes for a tree that's too big for a space, but a lot of times we're using them for those stressed trees. If a tree is growing in a very tight space, that's another big area where we use the growth regulators, because we're able to increase the amount of root mass that normally would exist in that much space. And then late summer and fall watering. It's amazing how water is overlooked as a benefit to tree growth. I got one slide here that talks about cabling and bracing. Sometimes it's too late to do structural pruning on a tree, so a cabling is something that's used to try to keep these two halves from splitting apart. It's a last ditch effort. A lot of times we're doing it to buy time. We're buying time for that tree because I can't undo the bad architecture, but cabling is a part of some of the tree maintenance that we're doing. One slide here on tree removals. This shows us using a crane. The crane's out of the picture, but you can actually see the big hook here. They're going to be hooking this big section of tree onto this hook, and the crane will pick that huge, huge chunk of tree up and lift it up and over the house. We use these cranes on sites where we don't have good access for equipment, and it's just much easier to just airlift it right out, up and over the houses. So this is where, you know, some expertise working with cranes and working with big trees, you know, is something that your everyday tree company doesn't necessarily have, but we've been doing crane removals for at least 15 years now. It's a big part of that menacing, you know, tree scenario that no one else wants to touch. The cranes make for, it's one of the best technologies that we've introduced into the tree removal aspect of what we do. Again, these are two logos. This is for a certified arborist. Individuals are certified, so I'm a certified arborist. My tree trimmers are certified arborists. The guys out there doing treatments into the soils are certified arborists. Certification follows you wherever you go. So a company isn't certified, individuals are certified. Now Rainbow Tree Care is a member of ISA. We're affiliated with that organization, and we entertain the professionalism that organization has been founded on. And so these are the kind of things you want to look for in ads for professional tree companies, and it's kind of the good housekeeping seal for weeding out someone that doesn't really know a lot about tree physiology and the sciences of trees. Again, I'm Al Olson, Rainbow Tree Care. You know, get the plug in here. We have two offices, one in Minnetonka and Little Canada, and we're basically a metropolitan-based tree company. We work the 7-county metro area, and we've got a lot of time on our hands. I can entertain questions, and I also have a booth downstairs for any of those that want to just stop down there.
I have a question related to tree clothing.
Sure.
And I just removed a birch in our home this past year. It was pretty rotted in the center. Actually, when it was felled, it just split open and
Sure.
like 7 inches of rot in the center. And we're getting ready to plant new trees. The front yard is pretty bare after removing this tree. And I was worried about how much time should be allowed for the former structure to decay before planting another tree in the same vicinity.
Anytime you're going to try to plant right where the other tree is, you're going to have the issues of just getting a hole dug in the space, or even with some of those non-rotted roots are. Moving 10 feet in any one direction is what I'd always suggest, because you're not going to encounter them. Even if they're rotted, you're still going to have to get in there with a big axe and start cutting out roots. And the bigger the hole, the better. Now, even if you're 10 feet away, you may encounter roots from that old tree, but they're going to be much smaller diameter and much easier to maneuver around or to cut through, so you can dig that big hole. You know, if you're going to plant a balled and burlap tree, don't be afraid to dig a hole 3 times bigger. The old joke at my house was my wife used to make fun of me because I would take 2 days to plant a tree. And I'm like, well, my soils were heavily compacted clay soils. And if I took the time to really dig some monster holes and make the soil conducive for the trees survival 20 years down the road, then I'm not wasting my money on a tree. And you come back 20 years later now, and these trees are absolutely massive. And trees, just a door away, a house away, they look like they haven't grown in 20 years. They're the same size trees. And the trees I planted are like a big forest. I took the time because I knew the benefit of planting the trees correctly and getting the right soil conditions for that tree to get established quickly. Anything you can do to make the soil well drained if it's a poorly drained soil. In my case, I had heavy clay soil, so I had to create a drainage system. Or if it's a very sandy soil, you want to get something that's going to hold moisture, because sandy soils is just the opposite. Everything's going to drain out too fast. So if you get lucky and you get that black loamy soil that's very rich, you get the best of both. That's why we always talk about clay, loam, sand. Sand and clay are at the extremes, and loam is right in the middle. It's the ideal. So hopefully that helps you.
We had used the stump grinders. The tree was cut down in May.
Yep.
And in September, October, we had a stump grinder. And probably went down about 3 feet deep. It was a real extensive grinding. So I kind of initially was thinking, we don't want to plant it in the same place, but after that much stump grinding, just maybe we could. But
you maybe could. I mean, with that much grinding, you maybe could. We normally don't grind down 3 feet. Normal stump grinding is 12 inches deep. But if you go down deep enough, you can get enough of that mass away. But, if you're really highly dedicated to planting in the exact same location, there has to be something really spiritual about that pinpoint in your yard. You know what I mean? Most people have enough space where they don't necessarily need to, nail that dot. So.
And a similar thing was thinking of taking down another tree this upcoming year. And it's a conifer, I don't know which species, but it's just looked like it's taken a beating in terms of leaf snow and the branches dropping.
Sure.
There's trees of similar age and species next to it that are just leaning over the top. And there's a self-starter that grew up on its own, we don't know its species, but a deciduous tree. And we're thinking of trying to fall the conifer without taking out this tree about an 1.5 inch diameter that's next to it. Do you have any thoughts about the merit of saving the little one?
I've actually made the case for sacrificing a tree in hopes of saving money in the cost of removing the tree. If I have to maneuver it around something that's irreplaceable, it's going to cost money. You can't just let things go. I've actually removed a tree so that I could get a piece of equipment in to make the tree removal of the specimen that I want to remove easier, and I actually removed the other tree for free just because I knew it was going to make removing the other tree that much easier. And what we removed, trust me, wasn't that great of a tree, and it wasn't a prized possession. And so removing it for free wasn't a big deal on our part, but it made for actually a less costly removal in the end. So we do that all the time. I don't know if I'd go to the extent for a really small tree. If it's something you could dig up and move, by hand, you may want to do that before you do the removal. But anytime you have to work around something like that, it costs money. So there's no one after me, so I'm here until all the questions are answered. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope I gave you some things to think about. Tree care is more than just trimming trees, and what we do at Rainbow Tree Care incorporates so many different disciplines. I have to be a soil scientist, I have to be a pathologist, an entomologist, I have to be a tree physiologist, I have to be good with people, good with dogs, you name it. I have to know a lot about grasses, I have to know a lot about weeds. It's things that it's an ecosystem more than just a tree. And that's what we're always looking at, is the science of what Mother Nature has figured out long ago and trying to incorporate some of those aspects into the way we maintain trees. And if you think about it, we don't go into the woods and trim trees, but we do it all the time in someone's backyard. And that's because it's not the woods, it's your backyard. And you don't want big branches falling down that are dead. You want to maintain a more aesthetic looking tree without dead wood in it. So thank you very much for stopping by today. And like I said, if you have any questions, Rainbow Tree Care has got a great website. It's easy to remember, rainbowtreecare.com. I have a booth downstairs, and I handle all of Bloomington. This is my territory for the company. So all of our clients in Bloomington, I have a personal hand in. So I appreciate it.